Hi students, I'm here to talk to you today about the extended essay in history. The aim of this presentation is to give you a bit of an overview of how the extended essay works in history, some tips for forming your beginning research questions, as well as a bit of an outline into the different supervisors and some areas in which you should really focus on when beginning your EE process. So the importance of a history EE is about formulating a judgment. And history as a discipline is focused on this idea of being a perpetual exercise in judgment and formulating an argument, which is the main focus of what your history EE needs to be about. The aim of a history EE is to develop an in-depth research into a particular area of interest. It requires an extensive amount of research, approximately about 15 to 20 sources on a specific question. And your investigation needs to be systematic in order to craft a reasoned conclusion that includes critical analysis and demonstrates a detailed understanding. The area of interest can be from any period of history all the way into ancient, but it cannot be within the past 10 years. So you cannot go anything probably, I would say, past 2005, because it's going to be very difficult for you to find research on those topics as well. You might find that there are some similarities between your IA in history and the EE process. So you can write your EE and the IA on the same time or period, but it can't cover the exact same elements. So you could be looking at it from a different perspective, or you could be looking at it from a different view, or maybe a larger element, but it can't be the exact same thing. It also can't be anything that we've covered in depth during the history course. So you couldn't do, for instance, Hitler's rise to power. You also can't replicate sources between the EE and the IA. And if you do, you must show that they've been used in a different way, or that you've accessed a broader range of primary and secondary sources. As you can see here in the table, it gives you a bit of an outline about the differences between the two assignments. The process in how you complete your history EE is outlined here. So as I said, the importance of a history EE is really about gathering that detailed research, and you need to conduct quite an extensive amount of research and gathering both primary and secondary sources. As supervisors, history teachers are available to help you in finding your resources, but this is a student-led EE. So we can give you the tools, and we can help you with suggestions on how to find some valuable resources. Some good starting places is obviously the AIS and Singapore National Library. We also have access to a range of online databases such as JSTOR, Questia, and Gale. And if, depending on your type of EE, you might also undergo some personal research, Maybe looking at your local histories or museums, or maybe different oral testimonies if you wanted to do something more local. So the type of research that you do will depend on your particular topic as well. You will find that you might use sources in a variety of ways. You could look at sources to establish or look at different interpretations. It may explain changing views over time or particular happenings or developments. And it could be a comparison of local and national developments. So it will really depend on what area you're focusing on in terms of what sources that you gather for that particular topic. But most importantly, that these sources need to be academic in nature. They cannot just be what you found on Google in the first page of the search terms, or what you found on Wikipedia. They need to be academically based. So the focus areas are really up to you. It can be anything that you are really interested in. It could be military history or social history, cultural history. It really can be any topic that you're interested in. But it needs to be, as I said, not from within the previous 10 years, and it needs to be worthy study. So it needs to be something that had some particular importance in the past. The topic itself should lend itself to a systematic investigation. So by that, I mean it should have enough resources in order to be able to be successfully argued, and it can't overlap significantly with any other work that you do in the IB. So that includes your IA, that includes the final exam. So in order to produce your initial research question, what you should do is first select a topic of interest. Okay, say for instance, I'm interested in studying World War II, and I'm interested in the military aspects of World War II. I could be looking at a variety of different aspects of World War II. I could be looking at the social history, what happened on the home front. I could be looking at the cultural history of World War II in terms of how it changed the nations in which experienced the World War II. I could be looking at the political history of World War II and how the nations came into conflict. But I really want to focus on the military aspects in my question. I would then go about conducting some preliminary academic reading. So I'd be looking on JSTOR, I'd be looking on the National Library, I'd be going into the school library to find what information that we have on military history in World War II. Then I start to really refine my ideas, and I'm really interested in the idea of blitzkrieg and the effectiveness of this military strategy. I would then begin to start looking into some more detail about this particular element, and I might start to develop the initial question of how significant was the Panzer IV in the success of the German blitzkrieg in France from 1939 to 1940. Once I've developed my initial question, I then need to evaluate it in terms of the following elements. So is it clear? Is it really clear what my key aspects of my question are? Is it focused? Your question needs to be quite specific and refined. Even though you have 4,000 words in order to develop your EE, the more focused you are, the better your EE is going to be and the more detailed analysis and discussion you're going to be able to develop. And is it able to be argued? Can I form an argument in relation to this particular question? And is it focused on a particular historical concept? Okay, so for this one, okay, it would be significance is the key historical concept in this. And then you need to lastly consider the research outcome. So what argument will I support? Am I going to say that the Panzer IV was the most significant? Am I going to look, and what other factors are also highlighted in the question? So maybe I need to look at the role of artillery or the role of the Air Force in also the success of the Blitzkrieg in France from 1939 to 1940. What's important in this question is that beginning with the STEM, how significant? And the research stems are really important into developing and refining your focus area. You can see here, these are some examples of very broad and then very focused topics. So an example might be, okay, the denazification in Germany after World War II. I would then, if I were going to focus my topic, looking at the success of denazification carried out in US zone of Germany from 1945 to 1948. So providing a time or a particular territory, a particular nation that you're going to focus on is really some good ways to refine your focus. And you can have a look through here about some initial questions you should start asking yourself about your focus area. And what's most important is that the quicker you develop a really refined focus and a refined question, the quicker you can begin starting some quality research. So when developing your initial research question, you should avoid what or how questions, as these lead to a narrative. As you've learned in history already, history is not about providing a recount of the past, but about developing an analysis and critical commentary. Some useful question stems could be how significant or how successful or to what extent. And when developing your question, it's also worth considering the various other factors present in your investigation. So just because I'm looking at the Panzer IV in German Blitzkrieg doesn't mean I'm not looking at all the other elements that were also involved in the success of Blitzkrieg in France from 1939 to 1940. So I need to have a wide view on the various different factors that are involved in this particular investigation, because my argument might focus on one of those other factors, but it should probably focus the majority of its time looking at the role of the Panzer IV. Some key points in terms of what makes a really good history EE are the following, and I've broken it down in terms of the different criterion for the EE process. So it needs to be a meaningful, worthy investigation, not within 10 years. It should show an informed, relevant, and appropriate choice of sources. So we're not using Wikipedia, we're not using a blog on history, we're not using a website, history.com. We're looking at academic sources, sources by historians, primary sources from the time. It should be a focused and attainable research question, and that is a really important point because that's where a lot of students don't score highly on the rest of their investigation because their research question has not been well developed in the beginning. So it's worth spending the time really developing that research question and making sure that it is something that is answerable. And you should also establish the historical context and the significance behind your topic. So if I'm looking at the Panzer IV in World War II, I need to be looking at it through the lens of military conflict during the time as well, and what role that really had. So I should be looking at it within its broader context as well. Your knowledge and understanding really needs to be detailed. You need to show an effective use of academic sources, and you need to become an expert in your chosen area of interest. In terms of critical thinking, this is the most important element, and because it is weighted most highly in terms of the marks, you need to be able to construct, present, and support effectively a specific argument. You need to have effective use and evaluation of sources, and you need to be able to discuss a variety of different factors. You might also include discussion about the different historiographical schools and the different interpretations that we see on different topics. It really needs to be something that has really an effective evaluation of the different views relating to a particular topic. And ultimately, your aim is to develop a reasoned argument that culminates in a consistent conclusion, that you've posed a thesis statement in the beginning and that you argue that throughout your essay and ultimately come to a consistent conclusion that is a valid one. Lastly, your presentation needs to be clear, you need to have accurate referencing, and it needs to be structured in a way in which it's visually appealing. The last criterion is engagement, and that is consistent across all of the EEs. So I'll allow Mr. Coughlin, when he's going through the EE process, talk a little bit about the reflection process, and that's the last section. But that needs to be something that you have really shown that you've been engaging in the EE process, and it needs to be something that analyzes your own learning, and it's not something that just describes what you did in each section. Lastly, some of the pitfalls in terms of history EEs is a lot of students are drawn to producing a narrative recount of the past. Okay, I'm maybe really interested in World War II. I'm just going to tell World War II from beginning to end. That would be something that would not score highly in an EE. Also, again, the breadth of your research question needs to be something that is really refined. You are going to encounter issues down the track if you haven't developed a really focused research question. Some students also struggle with researching and finding academic sources, and I really encourage you to use the expertise of your supervisor to help you to find some really high quality sources. And if so you're struggling with that, then it's worth talking to your supervisor about that. These need to be a diverse range, looking at primary and secondary, and they need to be effectively incorporated into your essay. So I'm not just dumping sources, and it's not just a compilation of sources, but they're being used to develop a particular argument. Your choice of topic is really important. It needs to be something that sustains your interest. This is something that's going to take you roughly about a year to complete. It needs to be something that you are really interested in. And so I'd really encourage you to choose a particular period of history that you find particularly interesting. And you need to make sure that you're looking at varying different interpretations and different factors within your particular area. You can't just focus on one factor. So I couldn't, in my question, just focus on the Panzer IV. I need to look at the range of other factors that's important with regards to the effectiveness of Blitzkrieg in France in 1939. Hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to approach your history EE. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to leave a comment, and all the best with your history EE.